opinions the ammunition of the archons because they spark a fire. Even when we use this word like get triggered, this is the language of ammunition, isn't it? Language of weaponry, of fighting, of warfare. Let's reconnect. Your explanation of Pistis Sophia brings to mind epic poems like the Iliad and Odyssey. Is that what it is, a Christian epic? Asks Janet. Well, no and yes, actually, is the answer, because no in that Christian, with regard to the Christian church, would not approve of us reading the Pistis Sophia. It was thrown out. Their copy in the Greek was burned back in whenever, the 1st century, or 2nd century, I'm not sure exactly, but we don't have it in the canon, and there's a lot of material there that is similar but also quite different. So in that sense, no. In the other sense, yes, it's about a journey, and the teaching is Christ-centered and helps us in our understanding of Christ consciousness and the journey of the soul. Now, in defense of the church, this is such a confusing text. I was reading through it yesterday and thinking, where am I going to go with the teaching for this channel? Because I know it's important. I know that it has teaching that is deep and that helps us to deepen and enrich our experience and knowledge of truth and our own purpose, meaning and purpose for our lives and the journey of the soul and why we've incarnated and what it's all about. But as I'm reading it, I'm seeing that it's a very complex web of mythological, metaphysical narrative with lots of characters and sub-characters, and there are emanations. Within these realms, there are emanations and then emanations of emanations, and they all have names. And I thought, if I try to get my own head around it to be able to teach you, do we want that? Will it be engaging? Will it be relevant? It'll just be like an academic study of mythology, and I don't want that. So I went to bed a little bit confused about where I was going to go today with the teaching. And I just asked, I asked, give me some inspiration for what to do in this next video. I want to stick with the topic, stick with the book, but I need it to be relevant. And I woke up. Well, it's funny actually what happened in the night. I'm going to read you what I was reading last night, before I went to bed. Page 33, I noticed that it was page 33 because it made me smile. 33, of course, is an angelic number. And it's the part where Jesus and his disciples are seated on the Mount of Olives, and then a great light power descended on Jesus and surrounds him. I think I mentioned this in the first video. If you haven't yet seen the video where I introduce the Pistis Sophia, it might be worth watching that first. I'll link it here so that you can go and have a watch of that one. Then I'm not having to repeat myself now. But he was taken up in this great light, and this is what it says. The disciples had not seen Jesus because of the great light in which he was, or which was about him, for their eyes were darkened because of the great light in which he was. But they saw only the light which shot forth many light rays. And the light rays were not like one another, but the light was of diverse kind, and it was of diverse type from below upwards, one ray more excellent than the other. In one great immeasurable glory of light it stretched from under the earth right up to the heavens. And when the disciples saw that light, they fell into great fear and great agitation. So many parallels there. I'm smiling because I remember I did a video. This is going back quite a few years actually. It was a video I did when I first got this book, and I did some reconnective healing, and I was sitting in my kitchen And it was before we had the kitchen changed around so that I could sit near the window. Unlike the sink's there now, I can't sit there to make videos. But the light was streaming from behind me, quite by chance. I mean, obviously I couldn't organise that, but it was. It sort of came over my shoulder, and it was like rays of light through my fingers as I was doing the reconnective healing. It was quite magical. And when I look back, I'll link that one at the end as well in case you haven't seen that one. But that's what it reminded me of, because it came forth, it said from below upwards, whereas normally light comes down because of the light source being the sun. This was coming up from the ground upwards, and of diverse type. The other thing I was smiling about was where it says, and the disciples fell into great fear and great agitation, and that reminds me of when the angel appeared in the Christmas story and the shepherds were in great fear. But what is so relevant about reading that to you is that last thing I read at night, and then went to bed and woke up this morning, and I went downstairs. I'm always first up because I get my son ready for school. And when I went into the living room, I noticed that the light was on. I could see from beneath the door that the light was on. And then I went through into the kitchen. I saw that the light was on in the kitchen too. That's so unusual. And I said to my husband later, he's always the last one up, so he, it's his routine to settle the dog and just turn everything off. And I asked if he'd left the light on, if he remembers. And he didn't remember. He says he might have done, but it's never happened before. The point was, this seemed like a kind of sign, an indication, because I'd been reading about the light. And I know that this is the theme that's recurring, these emanations of light and these realms of light, and the higher light and the lower light. So I've made some notes about the Pistis Sophia, and I am going to have to illustrate this as a kind of diagram, because I've tried to show you with my hands about how the idea of the earth, and then these realms of light, these 13 aeons that are realms that are in gradients of light, going higher with more light and lesser light as it comes closer to Earth, and how each of the aeons is ruled over by the archons. And I'll come back to that later on about the archons. But this light, you see, this diagram of the Gnostic understanding, certainly in the Pistis Sophia, I will make a video on, because I need to draw it as a kind of as a diagram to show you, because we have so many, and this gives you an indication of how it would be such a complex theology if the church had included it. We have the underworld, which is the place of chaos or the outer darkness to begin, and then we have the world, and that's the cosmos of mankind, okay? Thought place of mankind. Then we have the lower light, which is the aeon world, the world of the aeons, and it's a mixture of light and matter. So matter is being close to the earth. In Gnosticism, there's this idea that it's evil or corrupt, but my understanding as it's coming to me is that the aeons, the matter of Earth, is to do with our perception of separation, and that brings in selfishness, and so that's why it's corrupt. Well, that's where the corruption comes in, because of the illusion of separation. So you've got the lower light in the aeon world, which is a mixture of light and matter. Then you've got the higher light world, which is where the treasury of light is. And then above that, you've got the highest light world, which is the space of the ineffable, which I think in Kabbalah you would call the pleroma. So you see how we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 layers there of sort of like kingdoms, but just realms, I suppose. And yet within one of those, in the lower light, you've got these 12 aeons before you get to the treasury of light. So you start to see how it gets really complex. So I was asking, how do I understand this? And I awoke with this idea in my mind of there being this psychological battle. We know that there is this psychological warfare going on in our experience of life. And it's wisdom that will help us navigate this minefield. And this is really what I was being told this morning. We're in this psychological, psycho-spiritual battle. And our battle is not against flesh and blood, it's not against people. But there's powers that influence subconsciously, that are within the consciousness field or zone that we exist in, that we're submerged in when we are in our earthly bodies, in this earthly life experience. And it's funny because when I got up, Noel always reads through Twitter. I mean, I don't do Twitter anymore. I haven't come off out of on principle. I just don't go on it very much. I'm just busy looking at other stuff, and you can't do it all, can you? But he still follows Twitter, but he says it's going really weird and it's changing. And I don't know if he wants to stay on much longer because he's noticing that the algorithm just seems to be feeding him more stuff that is lower end vibrational. He doesn't say that, that's just what I'm saying. But he commented and read something out to me, or played this little video, and it was somebody having a rant. And even just listening to this person, I was aware that this stuff coming out is kind of like a pattern that's playing. It's about a particular person, an event, something that's happened, something that's in the news, maybe a celebrity, just whatever's hot this week. It'll be something different next week. It'll be a different protagonist, but it doesn't really matter who it is, because what's happening underneath is the same pattern replaying. And if you remember the Sophia story, you have Sophia getting lost in these lower realms, wanting to find her way back to the 13th aeon, which is the doorway of the treasury of light. And she sees Christ there. And she's weeping and lamenting because the aeons have stolen her light. And she keeps looking for light so that she can get enough light to escape from that prison and being there imprisoned by the archons. And I was reminded of something I wrote at the beginning of this year, actually, this book, My Forgiveness Journal. This was published it seems ages ago, but it actually was only about April, so I was writing it in February and March. And I talk about opinions in this. This guy, you see, who was spouting his opinion, there was so much energy and passion. And I was thinking, gosh, there's so much power there. You could light the whole house with all that energy. Thinking about my bill and how much it's going to be because the lights were on all night. The archons are not beings that have any power of their own or even existence of their own. They're just data patterns that replay, and they get their airtime, if you like, through the energy of others. And as I was listening to this person saying their opinion, what they believed to be their opinion, I'll come back to that in a moment, they were actually had a lot of energy in what they were saying, and I'm thinking, that's power of the archons. There's an archon at work in that. Most of the time we go around doing our thing, Living our lives from the limited perspective that we call I, we use the term myself to refer to the individual unit of consciousness that we understand the I to be. In this model, everyone is separate, each with their own independent mind. Thoughts, feelings, attitudes, experience all become our personal collateral. We believe they belong to us and no one else. I'm entitled to my own opinion, we say. It's funny, that use of that word entitled, because people often might use that phrase without thinking. When you think about the word title, it refers to authority, and it refers in particular to land. We have title deeds. It refers to territory. So we begin to trace the presence of the archons. The archons rule over a realm of consciousness, and they take their power from the light of others, from the light of human beings. I also wrote about the subconscious in this book, and I was reminded of this illustration that I use. For every conscious, this is to do with cleaning the unconscious, but for every thought that we have, the ratio is 1 to 1 million. Every conscious thought, there are 1 million thoughts that are unconscious. If you think of it as data programming, for every one that appears on the screen of the conscious mind, beneath the surface there's so much more going on. And so these are programs that are replaying. And sometimes it slips out in something that we say, and we won't know that we're running a pattern. So we're the playthings of the archons. Now, of course, this model of the unconscious is largely built on the work of Carl Jung, yes, Freud and others. Was it Adler? I don't know if it's Adler as well. It's just come to my mind. But I know that for me, Carl Jung is of particular interest because he was very much influenced and interested in the model of the gnostics to help explain what is intangible, what you can't see, and what he would say about the archetypes. He came to talk about the archetypes, and he first used that phrase, that term, to refer to these patterns in the unconscious. And he said you cannot find an archetype. You can't see it or name it. You can't dissect it and say this is what an archetype is. That's why people have so much difficulty defining it. But what you can do is see the effects of an archetype. You can spot its effects, its manifestations. Say there's an archetype at work. And so that struck me, that this warfare that's going on, that's drawing people into very polarized opinions, so that there's people, are triggered and react and join in, all the energy that's created by that, and the archons are just sitting back and warming their hands by the fire. This makes sense. This makes sense. And this isn't about, in any way, is this about me preaching? Really, it isn't. It's not about virtue signalling. It's about trying to understand what's happening, try to make sense of life, make sense of this psycho-spiritual reality that is life at a deeper level. And I think that you can actually sense the vibrational changes as we do more practice in our own meditation and light work that we do, reconnective healing. We become more aware of the subtle body, become more comfortable in the subtle body, and then we notice when our energy is being drained. We notice when an atmosphere changes. And what occurred to me that was a kind of light bulb moment, excuse the pun, a light bulb moment this morning was it's not important to really understand and get it right. I think I've been a little bit afraid that I might try teaching about this and then I'll not get it right. I'm out of my depth a little bit with the actual metaphysics of it. But that doesn't matter, because what I'm doing is listening to the inner teacher, the inner guidance that I'm getting about the application in psychological terms. And we are moving up and down these realms all the time, all the time. And I suppose the key is noticing it and being aware what is happening. And I'm reminded here, I want to read this because I did make some notes of when Jesus said, "You shall know them by their fruits." This is coming back to Carl Jung saying that you can't sort of ever see an archetype. We're dealing with the invisibles. Can't even be certain that they're there or that they exist. That's completely hypothetical. But he built his theory upon the fact that they repeat, there are patterns, and if you observe, you see it enough times, you can map it out that they exist. All right, you can't actually get to them themselves because they're insubstantial and intangible, but you see it. And this is in a way what Jesus is saying: you shall know them by their fruit. A good tree cannot bring forth evil fruit, neither can a corrupt tree bring forth good fruit. So wherever you are vibrationally, and wherever there's a vibrational match, does it feel good? Does it leave you feeling not only drained but kind of weary, lower energy? Or does it feel light, and does it feel inspiring? Another connection to scripture came to mind with the words of Paul. This was in Romans 7:23, when he talks about, "I see another law at work in me." This is back to Carl Jung saying you can't actually ever see it, but you can recognize the patterns, recognize what's showing up. You know, like when you sometimes say, "Where did that come from?" Like if you get really triggered and you think, you know that it's something unconscious and that you weren't actually in charge at that moment, you kind of lost it. And maybe you were just letting an archon take your energy, run with your energy. It was bleeding out of you, and you know, being aware might make us more guarded perhaps. Paul says, "I see another law at work in me, waging war against the law of my mind and making me a prisoner of the law of sin at work within me." So that's Romans 7:23, using old-fashioned language, using the language of sin, religious language, but that was 2,000 years before Jung was talking about archetypes. It's the same reality. It's the same universal law at work, but we're just finding a language for it. And awareness, I think, is key here. If we're going to think, what is the way forward? It's awareness. So, opinions, the ammunition of the archons, because they spark a fire. Even when we use this word like get triggered, you know, this is it's a language of ammunition, isn't it? Language of weaponry, of fighting, of warfare. And to come back to where we started, yes, there's a journey, and we can at least observe when we are running the energy or in the realm of these lower realms. We might engage in them, and then we might withdraw from them, but at least we know what's happening because we have awareness. So awareness is the counter weapon, if you want to use that word, or the shield. And And then we can make sure that we guard our energy and then use it to reach the higher realms. These realms are not places in the cosmos, out in space. It's not metaphysical, it's just to do with the mind. So it's all in you. And you can choose the higher or the lower. And be aware of forces that are seeking to control. And take back control through awareness of how you use your light. So I hope that that made sense. And I wonder if you have any thoughts about that. If you'd like to share them, please do in the comments. If something came to your mind as I was speaking. If you haven't seen the other videos, please watch those that will be linked now. And don't forget that we reconnect live every Friday afternoon. And we share the higher vibrational frequencies of energy, light and information that will bring more light in. So I look forward to seeing you if you can join me then. Thanks for watching. Take care. God bless. Bye for now.